Hi, everyone. Thanks for waiting. Welcome to the big conversation, First Steps, First Films. My name is Anna Souza, and I'm one of the programmers here at Sundance. Thank you so much for joining us today. You made it to this far in this festival. Please give yourselves a huge round of applause. I hope all of you still have your voices. I can't say the same for me. We're really thrilled to have joining us for this incredible conversation, three fantastic filmmakers. It's really a pleasure to have them share with us more about their career journeys and especially the process of getting their first features off the ground. We're going to do about half an hour of a regular moderated panel, and then we will open it up at the half-hour mark for questions. So I do encourage you to be engaging and to think about questions that you'll have for our panel. First off, I'm going to introduce the panelists to each of you and read their bios to give you some context. So first of all, we have Laura Chinn. Laura is a writer, producer, director, and actor. Suncoast is her directorial debut, and it is playing in our U.S. dramatic competition. She also created and starred in Pop TV's comedy series Florida Girls, and her book, Acne, a Memoir, was recently published by Hachette Books. Next, we have Carlos Lopez Estrada. He's an Academy Award-nominated filmmaker from Mexico City. Carlos's debut film, Blind Spotting, premiered opening night at the 2018 Sundance Film Festival. He was nominated by the DGA for Outstanding Directorial Achievement of a First-Time Feature Film. His second film, Summertime, also premiered opening night at 2020 Sundance. And his third film, Raya The Last Dragon, was released by Disney in March of 21 and was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Animated Feature. He's the founder of Anti-Gravity Academy, a production company and talent incubator supporting emerging artists, and he's here as a producer on Didi in our U.S. dramatic competition. Yeah. Last but certainly not least, Lana Wilson, who is a director and writer. Her previous works include After Tiller, 2013 Sundance Emmy Award for Best Documentary, The Departure, 2017 Independent Spirit Award nominee for Best Documentary, Miss Americana, which was here in 2020, also National Board of Review Top 5 Documentaries, and Pretty Baby, Brooke Shields, which was here last year and also received an Emmy Award nominee for Outstanding Direction. She is here at Sundance with Look Into My Eyes in our premiere section. Please welcome our panelists. Thanks for joining us. It's really an honor to be here, and I'm so glad that we get to have this conversation this day of the festival when it feels like premieres are out of the way and everybody's hopefully a little more settled. So to start, just to give everyone some context, I'd love for you each to kind of describe in your own words what the films that you have at the festival are about and which drew you to telling each story, just for anyone who might be brand new to them in the audience. Laura, maybe we can start with you.
Sure, yeah. So Suncoast is, it's a dramedy. It's based on my experiences. When I was a teenager, my brother was in hospice with Terry Schiavo, who in 2005, she was a woman who was on life support, and her husband wanted to take her off life support. Her parents wanted to keep her on, and the media got involved, and it became a very politicized case in Florida. And my brother happened to be down the hall from her while he was passing away, which doesn't sound funny, but there's a lot of humor in the movie, I promise you. Sounds bleak when I describe it, but it's a comedy, and you know, it was based on my experience being a young person going through something that most young people don't go through. And so there's an element of the film that is like a family drama, but there's also a sort of high school comedy running alongside of it. And that's sort of how my life felt at the time, this like, you know, parties and nightclubs and boys, and then this very serious thing happening at home. So it was trying to capture that.
Carlos?
Thank you.
The altitude here is crazy. Those two steps really got to me.
I feel you.
Like trying to catch
Was that like too much altitude, that last step up?
Some water.
Trying to catch my breath. I produced a movie called Didi, written and directed by Sean Wong. It's a coming-of-age story based on his experience growing up in a Taiwanese American household in Fremont, California. It takes place in 2008. Stars Isaac Wang, and it's this beautiful, beautiful movie that I had a chance to contribute to for the last almost 2 years. It's Sean's first movie, so I think there's a lot of things that I'd be happy to share here today, because I've gotten to go through, the whole first-time director experience, and then I've gotten to just live through it again through his eyes. So you asked like a 3-part question. I forgot the second and third
No, that was
parts.
pretty much it. What drew you to the
okay.
story, I guess, was the last part.
I love Sean. I think he's an incredible filmmaker, and I could just tell how much the story meant to him. And I just knew that it was going to be one of those movies that felt incredibly personal, and that it was coming from such an honest place that I just wanted to do anything I could to help him get to make it. Yeah. Thank you.
I have a film that I directed called Look Into My Eyes here. It's a feature documentary about a group of psychics in New York City conducting deeply intimate readings with their clients. The film starts plunging you into the client sessions, and over the course of the film, we gradually get to know and peel back the layers on who the psychics are. Many of them are former actors. Many of them have a shared experience with loss and with grief. And ultimately, the film is about exploring how all humans need witnesses in order to better see themselves. And I was drawn to this story. Actually, I had the idea the day after Donald Trump was elected president in 2016. I was depressed, sad, lost, terrified about the future. Never having been to a psychic before, I just walked into a $5 psychic reading shop without even thinking. And I pulled back this curtain, and there was a little table and 2 chairs, and no one was there. I sat down in one of the chairs and immediately felt this wave of emotion wash over me, almost like I was looking in a mirror at my own desperate, vulnerable state at that moment. And I was so struck by this clarity I was having, even though no one was there. And I got a reading from the psychic. It was brief, it was comforting. And as I was leaving, she asked what I did for a living. And I said, documentary filmmaking. And she said, oh, what do you make movies about? And at that time, I was finishing a movie about a Zen priest who counsels people considering suicide. And the psychic said, sounds like my life. And I was like, what? And she said, yeah, people come in here at real crossroads in their lives. You wouldn't believe the kind of situations I see every day. So that's when I had the thought of how amazing would it be to make a film where we get to be inside that space.
Amazing. I think these responses just go to show these are such different, incredible, expansive films. And you all came to filmmaking from very different angles. So I wondered if we could kind of talk a little bit about the beginning. Tell us about how you began making films, and also really what was like the moment, or was it a collection of moments where you knew that you wanted to direct?
Yeah, I mean, I began making films on this film. I had not done it before. I'd worked in television and producing television for 10 years, writing for TV, comedy primarily. And so I wrote for a lot of shows that were kind of like, the characters were kind of like sociopaths, with comedy, sometimes it's like you can't really get in emotionally with the characters. It's just like joke, 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 joke. And my favorite tone is movies, that premiere at Sundance, really, like movies that, like Little Miss Sunshine, and that have humor, and they also have emotion, and you really care about the characters. And I find I'm laughing so much more when I care. And so this feature was an attempt to kind of break away from just writing, hard comedy things, and tapping into my own past and my own emotions to figure out how to tell a more emotional story. And so when I wrote this script, I started in 2018, I finished in 2020, and this script was on the blacklist, which was so thrilling and exciting. And then we just started to put the movie together from there.
I came from music videos. I used to play in bands in high school, and I started making videos for them for no money, with our families helping us out as cast and crew. And then I got to go to film school, and all of my friends' bands started doing a little bit better. They started getting indie record labels, and they went from no money to like $500 budgets. And while I was at film school, my friends and I started this little group of just like collaborators where we would all help each other out on projects. And I did music videos for a long time. Definitely just got to the point where it's just like, is this it? Is this my life? I'm just gonna do this forever, just work on $2,000 music videos and ask all of my friends for favors. But slowly, the projects that we were working on kind of like got a little bigger and better, and we started getting more money. And that really became my school as a filmmaker, because I was doing that for a long, long time, and I got to experiment so much. I got to develop my circle of collaborators, my little community, most of them people who I still work with. And I think it also just helped me start asking some questions about the type of things that I wanted to do, the type of, just like tonally, the type of filmmaking that excited me the most, stylistically, the types of things that just felt like they resonated with me. Storytelling-wise, I think I started sort of like crafting the beginning of what maybe one day became like a voice, but I did so many of these. And at the time, I think I felt a little bit frustrated that, you know, I wasn't getting to where I wanted to get, and that I was just like stuck in this real small filmmaking circle. But the time, so I made a music video for a band called Clipping from LA. The rapper of that group is David Diggs, who had been writing this script that turned into my first feature Blind Spotting. And I got to make the movie, and I did realize that all these tiny, really difficult projects prepared me for this movie in a way that I think nothing else could have, because I felt comfortable on set. I had tried so many things, worked with so many different people, understood how a set worked, and I think that the fact that the movie was not a total disaster was a lot, like really directly a result of all the we think that indie film is indie, but music videos are like you're really, it doesn't get scrappier than that. It really, I have just some funny and horrific stories about the stuff we did in order to get our shoots produced. So anyway, yeah, it's I guess music videos was my entry into indie world, and then I premiered the movie here, and I'm very happy to feel like no matter what I do, I'll always keep a foot in the indie world, because that's really where my heart is.
I had another career for 8 years before I became a filmmaker. I studied film history and dance choreography in college, and after college, I never, the idea of going to film school never crossed my mind, but I did love movies and dance and art generally, and I wanted to be a programmer, a curator. And I got a job at Film Forum, the movie theater in New York. I then got a job at Performa, which is visual art performance biennial. And I kind of worked my way up there, had every job in this tiny nonprofit organization, and ultimately I was the film and dance curator, which was a really fun job, because it was like doing, you know, retrospectives, it was working with international choreographers. I loved it. But I also always wanted to do my own work at the same time. So over those years, I was always working on script ideas or coming up with documentary ideas on the side, but really just never had the courage to try it and to take a leap. And I remember I was kind of increasingly getting jealous of the artists I was working with, like sitting across from me at the table thinking, oh, I wish I could do this and that. Wouldn't that be cool? And one day they're on the news, this is in 2009, I don't know if any of you remember this, but there was an abortion doctor named Dr. George Tiller who was assassinated in his own church. He was handing out programs in church, and someone came in and shot him in Kansas. And I watched that on the news and was horrified by it. And reproductive justice had always been really important to me personally. And as I watched the coverage of this on the news, I was saddened by what had happened, of course, but I was also really disturbed by how it was being covered in the mainstream media. There was this kind of two-sidesism where it was a lot, kind of abstract debate about when does life begin, and getting talking points from these different people who argued about it. It was very black and white. And as I got to learn more about Dr. Tiller, he was an evangelical Christian. He was a registered Republican. He was a military veteran. I thought, this is not who I would expect to be the most controversial abortion doctor in America. And I thought, I wish I knew more about him. I wish I knew more about why a woman would seek an abortion so late in pregnancy, which is what made this doctor controversial. And then I started to think, who's left? Are there any doctors who will keep doing abortions? Who are they? What are their lives like? Do they have targets on their back? What is it like to be them? And I thought that would be an incredible film, to be inside the lives of the last few third trimester abortion doctors in the country. And then I started to think, because I was very snobby about cinema in general, I was like, documentaries are always badly shot. Like, it'll probably look terrible. And then I started to imagine the theoretical director and how they would get it wrong, and also be very jealous of this imaginary person. And I was like going down this whole spiral. It was insane. And a friend of mine at the time just like stopped this and was like, Lana, the only thing stopping you from becoming a filmmaker is actually making a film. And I was like, you're right, And I found a friend who had made documentaries before to partner with me, Martha Shane. We directed it together, and so I could learn from her. But I think it was just also a kind of a story that it felt so urgent to me. I felt like I had to do it, and it was like essential, and no one else was going to do it, and it had to happen now. And I kind of convinced myself it was the most important thing in the world. And I think that, and also the courage of the doctors in the film, they're facing actual life and death, not like me facing my, minor anxieties and ego problems. So that gave me courage to be like, I've got to do this.
I want to go back to something that Carlos was saying about community and your collaborators, and you touched on this a little bit too, Lana, talking about Martha, but I wondered if you could each just speak about how you found your key collaborators and sort of how they helped shape your approach to storytelling as you went through the process of making your first film, and really what you're looking for when you're searching for collaborators.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about my cinematographer on this movie. I didn't know dick all about cinematography, you guys, like nothing. And it was the thing that was keeping me from directing something, right? I was like, I'm a girl, and those are words that boys use, Like, it was like so fake and dumb in my mind. And so I remember like talking about it to people, and I'm like, I don't want to be on set and be like, can you put the thingy on the thingy? And they're like, well, then learn the words. And I'm like, oh, right. And I did flashcards, like I'm like, oh, right. Like, you can learn something you don't know. You're not born knowing it, So I went into this, like I took collab classes before I did this, because I had done, wardrobe and location and casting, and I'd done all of that in TV, but I had never done or dealt with photography. I had never spoken to a cinematographer. I'd never shot listed before, and that was my self-esteem was like, you can't do this. You have to go to film school, And so the collabs were really helpful. And then, in finding a cinematographer, I was like, I have to find someone who's not gonna speak down to me or treat me like a little kid. And so I met with a lot of cinematographers, and a lot of the meetings were kind of like, here's how your movie is gonna look, and here's what we're gonna do. And it felt like, oh, I'm gonna go to film school with this person. It's gonna feel like I'm a student at film school, which I didn't want. Like I wanted this to feel like a movie that I was directing. And so Bruce Francis Cole, who's just like an angel. He's an angel. He's just amazing. And he's worked with a lot of female directors, and he's had some features here. And I spoke to those women, and they were like, Bruce is really good at working with women. Do you know what I mean by that? And I was like, oh, he doesn't like over-explain everything. Talk to you like you're a toddler, ask you if you need your diaper changed. So I was like, I do know what you mean by that. And Bruce was just, everything was, he would show me photographs and like, this photographer is inspiring to me. Does she resonate with you? Like everything was suggestions and collaboration. And when he did a camera test and showing me the lenses and talking me through everything in a way that wasn't condescending. And I also found that when I showed up, I knew so much more than I thought I did, and the collabs were so helpful, and my flashcards, which I still have, were so helpful. I'm like, aspect ratio, let's talk about it, I know. So, I got through that hurdle that was blocking me from telling a story, really, was jargon. And there's a cinematographer named Sam Levy who I spoke with early on in the process who did Lady Bird. He's amazing. And he said to me, because I was explaining my anxieties, and he was like, Laura, there is going to be cinematographers that talk this way in front of you and are going to try to intimidate you and make you feel small. Fuck them. Fuck them. And he's like, your job is to tell an emotional story. If you know how to speak about emotions, then you know how to do this job. You know how to direct. Your job is to talk about emotions, and a cinematographer's job is to translate that to photography, And so, talk about your shots emotionally. Talk about the emotions you want to convey in the scene, and trust, if you have the right cinematographer, that they'll translate that, and they're not going to, use a bunch of jargon to try to intimidate you. And it was such good advice. Anyway, both those gentlemen are lovely, and yeah, collaborators.
I just had a quiet freak out after you asked that question because I was just like, oh my god, I don't know that I can answer it. I don't know. And I think it is because I really haven't had sort of like this philosophy of like this is the type of person that I want to work with, and I think more than anything the approach that I've taken is trying to be really open to surprises and trying to like trust my gut when you meet someone and when you have a conversation with someone that just feels right for some reason that you're like making movies is hard, and as hard as we can make it sound, it's probably not even like the tip of the iceberg. It's really like the most draining, emotional, psychologically like it's you'll see.
It's true.
I'm fully agreeing with you. I'm like, go darker, go harder.
So I think that just knowing that the people who you're welcoming into your circle are going to go through these really, really trying experiences next to you, that they're going to get to see the best, but certainly the worst of you, that they're going to get to see your most vulnerable, your most insecure parts of your personality, and that you're going to need to find a way to feel comfortable to fail in front of them. I think it's a pretty high bar, and to me it's something that a resume is obviously not going to be able to like help you with, and you go on meetings with people and you take them out on lunch, but still it's you really get to meet people deeply while you're working with them on a movie. So to me it's been a lot of luck and a lot of openness to just saying let me just put my cards on the table, tell you the kind of project that I'm working on, tell you why it's important to me, why I believe in it, and if I see that glimmer in your eye that I have about the project, and if I feel like you connect to it on or you're curious about it on the same level than I am, then I feel like we can go on this journey together. And that's the only gauge that I have in terms of how to bring someone on. I don't know that that's super helpful. Maybe it is. But I found that I've worked with friends and I've worked with people who have become my friends, and I think I really, really value the process of making something as much as I do the product. And I think that more and more people are really getting rid of this old school mentality of, what's important, what's on camera, and how you get to it is sort of like it's secondary. And I feel like movies were made like that for a long, long time, and finally people decided that, that's not correct and that we need to value the people on the process just as much. So I do believe that if you create an environment that is healthy and that is safe, that is motivating for the people that you work with, that you never know if a movie is going to do well or not, and that's out of your hands, and who cares? But what's important is that you get to end up with something that you feel proud about, and something that you can look back and say, look, it may not be perfect. People may respond to it how I want them to or not, but I know that I put myself into it, and I know that I did my best to have the people around me feel like they contributed to it in a meaningful way. And that's kind of like the only sort of like philosophy that I've used when finding collaborators, and I'm very happy about it. I think I call all the people who I've worked with friends, and some last longer, some for some reason don't. But anyway, I'm rambling. Okay, that's it.
No, it was a great answer. Thank you.
I'm with both of you on so much of what you've said, both on finding cinematographers who don't talk down to you and you're a female director, big time. And also what you're saying about the journey and the process is as important as the final product, because it's true, it is not in your control. It has nothing to do with the movie being great or not, what happens after it's out, in my opinion. I mean, maybe a tiny bit, but not really. There's so many factors out of your control. But I guess, for me, collaborators, it's been a learning process the whole way through. I didn't know what a call sheet was until my third film. I'd never heard of that. I didn't know what it was. I was like, oh, this makes it easier for people to meet up here. And, but so I definitely came in a bit blind, but not having any of the language at all, technically at all, but having been a curator, being able to talk about art in my own way, which might be like looking at a shot instead of saying I like a longer lens, saying I want the background to be blurry, I mean, really. And I just decided I'm just gonna work with people who can understand me. And it is a thing with cinematographers, with editors, with crew, but think about working with a composer, for example. That's a very abstract, creative process to be in. And I have found it's actually, I don't know the difference between an eighth note and the quarter note, or I would never dictate to a composer like that, but I can say, I want this music to feel like a lifeboat bobbing up and down in the ocean at night, or things like that. And I just decided like this is the way I'm going to have to express myself here. But I think it's nice for collaborators because then they get ownership in translating what I'm telling them. Like I feel that I'm respecting their craft and their specific knowledge, which I don't need to have. You know what I mean? All I think a director needs to have is you need to know fundamentally what this film is about and what you want the experience of watching it to feel like. And you're the only person who knows that. So if you can keep coming back to that over and over again, then I think it's okay if you're not way in the weeds with your collaborators. But that said, I have noticed that I've tended to gravitate towards people who are really analytical. Like with documentary cinematography, you kind of, it's like you're preparing for a fiction film, but it's double that because then you can't control any of the people who you're actually filming. So you kind of, I would come up with a plan. I would do, again, not knowing how to do it, really, I would do like really crappy hand-drawn storyboards with stick figures. This is my dream for how this scene we're gonna shoot today would unfold. Here's the beginning, middle, end. I kind of lay out the fantasy and be really prepared with the crew over how to film it. And then like no one does what you want and you have no control. And so everything changes. And so then at the end of the day, I love working with people who want to look at the footage with me. Like I'll look at the footage, I'll pull stills. Like I love this composition because it's making me feel this, that composition's making me feel that. And I love that back and forth. And then the cinematographer being like, yeah, well, what if we tried this or that? And just all continual improvement. Because I feel like often I start out shooting a documentary and the footage at the beginning is a disaster and it's all wrong. But then by the end, hopefully, I could watch the raw footage for hours and I'm like, this is amazing. We're so in sync and we've cracked it in a way. So that with cinematographers, documentary editors are very much like writers. They have a huge creative role that I think is underestimated. So it's, you come into a documentary edit and it's like you're writing a script, but you're drawing from material that you filmed. So my favorite documentary editors, I love having someone who can bring a fresh perspective because often I'll have started with, this is what I think the structure, the basic story of the film is. But I like someone who can come in and look at the footage and be like, this is not translating at all on camera. I know the real person. And I'm biased because of that. An editor who has not met these people in real life, because people are so different on camera than in real life, they can bring this fresh perspective and wake me up to some blind spots I might have. So I love that collaboration process and want someone who will challenge me. And I think those are the biggest collaborative roles for documentaries. But yeah, I agree too with what you two have been saying, that the number one thing you need, because this is hard work, you need people who are behind the vision and who are not going to try to impose, who will challenge you and have ideas, but who are not going to try to impose what they think would be a better vision on you. And that's something I think you suss out those people and you start to vibe with certain people and others not, and you figure that out over time.
I mean, going off of that a little bit, like how do you sort of navigate doing that balancing act of like protecting the vision when, being in indie film, the resources may not always be there? Like, how do you sort of navigate where you may need to compromise or not?
That's a hard one. It's really hard. I mean, I feel like I had amazing producers. They were really, really amazing. And so because I've worked on such low budget stuff. I know I've worked a 19-hour day. I did a 19-hour day once on a TV show. It's so hard, and you're putting people's lives in danger, So with this, there'd be things like we're gonna have to we're out of money in this way. And I'd be like, all right, let's just cut this scene, And then the producers would be like, no, don't do that. Like they would step in and be like, we'll figure out a different way. We'll add another shoot day. We'll figure it out, So I feel like I was like a little bit too like down to cut things because the trauma of a 19-hour day and seeing crew members who were doing a 22-hour day, during my 19-hour day, and just being like, I'm unwilling to do that again. But then, people would step in and kind of, protect the movie overall. And it's such a collaborative thing that I think myself, you have to be willing to compromise and then also be with people who are like unwilling to compromise at the same time, because it's like, I felt like this movie had so many fairy godparents in that when I would be like, you know what, we'll just switch this location to this less beautiful location so we can save money and save lives, then someone would step in and be like, no, we're going to figure it out in a different way. So it was like, I think because I was so open to compromise, it made people feel like, okay, she's not being rigid about unreasonable things, so let's figure out a way to help her. Like it helped the overall energy of the shoot because I wasn't just like absolutely not about everything. So then they were able to kind of step up and compromise and not compromise for me in a good way.
That is such a hard question. Because I think, that's like the great creative struggle of specifically of filmmaking. It's like, how can you have as crystal clear a vision as you can, but also be open to just life working the way it does and throwing a surprise every other second. And I don't. I'm gonna pass over to you. No. I think it's a couple of things. I think that I know people talk about how important prep work, but I do think more than the actual like table work and documents and whatnot. I think to me the spiritual prep work of a movie is what matters the most, and understanding what it is about the movie, what it is about the characters, what it is about the story that is most important to you, how you want things to feel, how you want, like, what is that like magic that you're trying to create? Because to me, that is the one thing that shouldn't change, and that is the thing that, not to say that it can't evolve or you can't discover stuff while you're in the process of making it, but everything else is likely going to be affected by a schedule, by the money, by the many variables that come in when you're working with dozens and dozens or sometimes hundreds of people. Everything is kind of open for disaster. And I think that having the willingness to just say, look, I know how this is supposed to feel, I know where I want it to go ultimately. Now, whether we take this path or this path, whether it takes 2 days to get there or 10 days to get there. So I don't know, I think it's really just an openness and also being able to communicate, not so much with authority, as I think a lot of people think that the role of a director entails. I think that we have to dismantle this idea that a director is this all-knowing being that has all the answers and can command everyone on set to do exactly what they want them to do. I think that's another old school myth that conversation like this hopefully are dismantling, and directors are people with insecurities and doubts and questions and people who are learning as much as everyone else on set is. But I think that having the empathy and kindness to be able to ask for things that are important to you, but in a way that the people who you're asking these things from feel encouraged about, and not like you're dictating something. So I think that to me that's the hardest thing to do, and the thing that I think, in my opinion, makes a successful director is someone who has a clear vision and can bring their collaborators onto that vision and get them excited as if it were their own, and getting to collaborate not from a place of like, this is my job and I have to do this, but it's like, I love this project as much as you do, and I want it to succeed for all the same reasons, and I want to feel like an author of it as much as you do. I really don't think I answered your question at all, but I
Yeah.
said something.
I love that, and picking up on that, it's like, one thing I realize is you want the collaborators to feel not like employees, but like your allies, you know, on this like mythical art making mission that you're on, you know, and it often feels that way. You're going up against maybe a studio in some cases, but more often time, money, weather, the limitations of reality in my case, you know. So yeah, but the compromise question is a great one. Time and money, the biggest ones for me when I'm being told we are literally out of money. I'll usually push a few more times. Look at what money do we have left? What are we spending money on next? Could we, you know, and same with time. I definitely will like can't stop trying to improve things as much as I can until the project is kind of ripped away from me, usually. I think with documentaries where you're filming with real people, everyone has a limit. Every documentary subject has something they will say no to, something that makes them uncomfortable. They don't want to be filmed doing that, you know? And so I have found that with real people and subjects, it's so much about that relationship. And often for the first half of the project, I'm trying to be gentle and err on the side of less is more and not be really imposing and take it very slowly. And then there's always some point, I find about halfway through a documentary, where something happens that really bonds you with the subject, and that's when you know that you can push. And so then I spend the second half of the project pushing, and then get to a point where they're just like, no, absolutely not, please stop filming now. You know, like, but I think you have to get to that point or you don't know how far you can go, you know? So so there's that. But yeah, the compromising, I guess I often end up in these situations where, let's say we're trying to set up a camera and there's two options, option A and option B. Neither of them is quite like my fantasy in my head. And we're moving around, we're trying stuff, we're brainstorming ideas, what can we do? And then finally it comes down to one is better, one is worse, you know? And that helps me when I get really stuck. If I'm like, you know, I've gotta find the way forward, just better or worse. Author George Saunders, who I love his writing on creativity, he writes about like having this internal metronome in his head where he'll kind of read back the short story text he's written every day, and the metronome will either be like better, 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 like worse, worse, worse. And he describes writing as a process of continually revisiting that metronome over and over and over again. And hopefully it's by little step by step getting better, better, better. It might not ever quite get to this image in your head, but as close as you can, I feel like you'll hit a wall where a compromise is okay.
I do want to open it up to the audience at this point. Why don't we start Hear You in the White? Yes?
Hi. First off, thank you guys so much for allowing us the opportunity.
Oh, there's a microphone coming, sorry.
Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to hear your insights. And as fellow student filmmakers, we're here with a group of people. And for me, my question to you would be, if you were given an opportunity to sit in a room with the filmmaker of your dreams and had one question you can ask them, because you're up there, we're learning to get up there, what would the question be and why?
This panel has had the hardest questions out of like. Can you just ask us what we're excited to see at Sundance?
I am in awe of that question. My brain was like, oh my God. I can't answer it though, so somebody else.
I guess I'd be curious, you know, so one of my favorite directors is the person I wrote my thesis on in college. He's a Finnish director named Aki Kaurismäki. And he kind of makes films that are extremely, extremely similar and extremely, extremely beautiful and funny over and over and over again. And his personality is very hard to read because he's really deadpan. He hardly says anything. He won the grand jury prize at Cannes one year and just went, thanks, and like took the trophy and left the stage. And so I would honestly love to have him in a room and be like, does this stress you out? You know, like, and if it doesn't, because he seems so unflappable to me from the outside. He's worked with the same collaborators for almost 40 years. I'd be like, what have you learned over making basically the variations of the same film over and over for so many years? Like, what is the biggest thing you've learned? Like, what do you wish you could have told yourself 40 years ago? That's what I would want to know.
This is kind of a cop-out to your question, but maybe. I really love meeting early career filmmakers, and I think that I often learn a lot more from them than sort of like people who are very established, just because there's something about, I think as a filmmaker, at some point you enter this stage where you're just an adult filmmaker, right? And you're amazing, and you do the things that you do, and you don't really. You're still searching, but in a different way. And I feel like seeing people who are just getting into our medium and seeing the questions that they're asking, seeing the stories that they come, and I feel like the curiosity that comes with not knowing all the answers and how you go about solving problems that maybe to a seasoned filmmaker it's like, oh, of course you have this practical issue and you just go to this person who you hire, or you just and I feel like you start sort of like not needing to ask these questions, but like hearing both of them talk about their entry into filmmaking and the fact that they may not have known all the intricacies about it, and the fact that they go about navigating that in creative ways, and they use their own life experiences and their previous whatever circumstances led them to filmmaking to troubleshoot, and that'll lead them to come up with ways that maybe someone who's very seasoned would not go about troubleshooting. So anyway, I all this to say I'm excited about groups like this, and I'm excited about working with people like Sean, who has so much creativity, and eventually he'll figure out exactly all the ways that the grades used to make movies. But I think right now it's that really exciting time where that curiosity leads to creativity that is really unique. So again, I don't know if that is satisfying to you, but yeah.
I feel like I have an answer to a question, but I don't know if it's yours. No, I was just thinking about, because I in terms of like other directors and like learning from other directors, I was listening to Ron Howard on a podcast, and he was talking about how he hires his first ADs are always like they could direct the movie themselves. He's like, they're so accomplished, right? He's like, he gives them a producer credit, and they could just take over and direct it themselves, And he's like, he does that because he is so solely focused on performance, because he's an actor and that is what he cares about, right? And he knows his first AD can pick up any other ball that's dropped, and he has the safety to just focus on performance. And that gave me so much permission hearing that, because I was like, oh, I feel like for me it's story and performance, because I come from writing and I come from acting, and like story and performance are everything to me. So when our cinematographer is complaining about the light and he points out something, I'm like, oh yeah, that does suck, but I didn't see that right away, And so that gave me permission to be like, I can be who I am. I don't have to be everything. I don't have to know everything. I can be who I am. And I once, writing in television, like day one, there was another comedy writer in the room, and he said to the showrunner, oh, I don't want to be in a joke room. I'm terrible at jokes. I'm better with story. And he said it so confidently, and I was like, oh, like he knows himself, and it's okay that he doesn't like jokes, and he's good at story, and that's okay. And those moments in my career where I see people that are older than me and have been doing it longer, and they have the confidence to be like, here are my weaknesses and here are my strengths, and I'm gonna like go towards my strengths, and it's okay that I have weaknesses, that has been invaluable to me, completely invaluable.
Great question. Thank you. All right. Why don't we start over here? Yes. And then
Me?
And then we'll come back around.
Thanks, Carlos. I love your attitude of being so open for feedback. As you said that you look to learn so much from new filmmakers. So that's great attitude. I've learned so much from that. I've got a question for you, Laura, which is, since it was your first film and you thought you don't know a lot of aspects about filmmaking, how did you face your challenge of getting someone more experienced like Bruce to collaborate with you and come on board with you and sort of work with you? Is it money, or do you get them to love your subject?
I Venmo'd him $1,000 before the meeting. I was like, check your Venmo, Bruce. No, that's a good question. For this movie, here's the thing. No one would have let me direct this feature film if I didn't write the script. Like they just wouldn't have. So this script was so well received, and I'm so grateful about that. It was a story that resonated so much with people in Hollywood, and sort of, I finished the script and sent it to my representatives, and it just kind of burned its way through the town. And I was getting emails from like CAA, and they were like, what about this huge celebrity to play the role? Like it was just insane. And it came out of the script. And I believe writing is like super, super magical. This is not like faux humility. This is just whenever I sit down to write, it feels like it flows from a source that is indescribable. And so when I think about how that script unfolded and how it took place, like it was just a very magical thing, you know? And it was so well received that that's how, you know, we got Woody Harrelson on board, and then we got Laura Linney on board, and then we got Searchlight on board, and the whole thing was like, I'm gonna direct this script. You can't have the script without me as the director. So that's how I kind of like scammed my way in. And so so that was really it. And so with Bruce, with all these people, it was, by the time we were hiring those people, it wasn't, you know, Laura Chinn, first-time director who doesn't have anything to prove that she can do this. It was Woody Harrelson, Laura Linney, and Searchlight, you know? So it was a much different thing, and that's how we were able to attract everyone.
Right here, yes.
Hi, this has been a phenomenal panel. I'm a television director, and I'm directing my first feature in a couple months. I'm curious what advice you guys have for first-time directors.
You must know so much already as a television director. I mean, I'd honestly be curious to ask you what you feel like works about television directing and what doesn't work about television directing. You know what I mean? Like, what do you enjoy about it? Like, when do you feel like you're doing your best possible work directing television, and when do you feel kind of like hamstrung or like you can't quite get there, or what's in the way? And I imagine, having not directed television before, that the cool thing about making a feature in comparison might be that you can create your own environment in every way a little bit more, and you can really customize it to what your strengths and weaknesses are, or what you feel like you know already, fine, but if you want to try a totally different way of operating, you can here, you know? So I guess I'd be curious to hear more about that from you. But you guys have directed, you've done more TV, so.
I mean, I started with features, and then I got to do some TV. So I would be very curious to hear your experience.
Could you come up
All
here?
eager for
and
your
join us?
answer to this question, because we don't know.
I would be very curious to see what skills or aspects about TV directing, how specifically they apply to feature films. I don't know the size of the production that you're going to work on, but if it's your first time, I would assume it's on the I don't even know. Yeah, people are like, oh, $1 million's so small, but that's so much money. Yeah, but you're gonna have to make a lot of compromises. You're gonna have to find people who believe in the vision, and TV. I feel like it's a lot more of an industry than indie film is. So there's all these like systems that are in place for you to succeed, and in indie film there aren't. And so yeah, I think just make sure that you're bringing on people who you really think are there for the right reasons, and who are going to go to bat for you and believe in why you're wanting to tell this story. That's not helpful.
It is helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like TV directing is so different, right? Because there's like a showrunner there and producers there, and everyone's kind of telling you, go tell the actor this, and go tell the DP this, and so I mean, the difference I feel like with this movie is like it's yours, like I feel like yeah, I mean, I feel like the writer is the boss in television, which is why I like it. But then in movies, the director is like the person, and that's, I think, going to be really cool. I mean, I know all my friends who like solely direct television can feel creatively stifled, because they're like sort of just being told, go do this, go do that, and it's not your vision, your thing. So I think you're gonna crush it, because your ego's gonna go insane, and you're gonna be God on set and all those things. But advice, yeah, I mean, it's gonna be so challenging, and you're gonna like really hate it a lot of the time, and then you're also gonna be like, this is the best job I've ever had, and I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, and I want to add just one more thing to that. I love all of that, but just hearing you talk, and again, having not directed TV before, so not knowing any of this, but I have directed bigger studio projects and independent projects, and I think you're going to find the excitement of the creative freedom, as Laura was saying, but you're also going to find the loneliness. It's very lonely and that's okay. So I guess I just encourage you to say
Very
there will be
lonely.
moments and you have great collaborators and you have supporters, and all of it, but there is a fundamental, really profound loneliness to directing features, because ultimately the responsibility is truly yours, and you'll feel that the responsibility for the movie to be great, for everyone to have a good experience making it, all of that. But and so there will be these moments where you're just like, even if you have the best collaborators on earth, true partners, supporters of your vision, you'll be like, I'm completely alone here, and it's hard. So I would just prepare yourself for that and know that that's normal and okay.
I think that's great advice, and just in like an even broader sense, taking care of your physical and your psychological health, because it gets lonely, because it gets hard, because it goes on for so long, like the endurance that you need to have, and I think as a first-time filmmaker, no one really preps you for that, but week 3 starts, and you really cannot get out of bed, and you get home. I mean, I don't know if everyone, but I think most people have asked. I remember just getting home in week 2 or 3 of shooting and just sitting on my bed and not being able to do anything. Like I just my brain was so spent, my body was so sore, and I just would sit just like, I don't even know that I was thinking about anything. I would just sit there for like hours just trying to figure out like, okay, what happens now? And it's hard, and I think that you need to make sure that you're taking care of your mental health and that you're enjoying the process as much as possible, because it definitely gets hard. And
Yeah,
lonely.
get your therapist now to see if they can move you to Saturdays. That's the thing. Like, ask them now. Give them months in advance. I'm going to need to go to Saturdays. That's what I did.
I want to go to a hand in the back just to mix it up. Yes, you.
I'm going to stand so you see me. Thank you so much for everything you're sharing. It's so valuable. Everything you're talking about, working with collaborators, and that really resonated with me. I'm a film editor, and so I always say what I need from the director is a clear vision and then the trust to execute it with the tools that I have, the vocabulary that I have. I'm wondering how you go about communicating your vision. Do you use reference films? What kind of conversations do you have with your collaborators? And when does that happen in the process?
Yeah, that's such a good question. We used a lot of still photographs. We used a lot of photographers. Our DP, he loved Petra Collins, who's just stunning. And there's a Dutch woman named Rineke Dijkstra who had these beautiful photos of these insecure adolescent girls in bathing suits by the ocean. There was something so vulnerable about it. Justine Kurland has a book called Girl Pictures, amazing photography. So we used a lot of still photography a lot of it was from the early aughts. And then a lot of reference movies. Our DP, we watched movies, we would tell each other, watch this, watch that. We talked a lot about it. It's really, you're just making it up, there was a painter that our production designer loved, that we went to go to a museum to look at their paintings, that they happened to have an exhibit. It was really just any way that you can, because there's not a language really. I think we pretend there is, but there's not. And it's with talking to the composer. Our composer was Esty Haim of Haim, the band Haim, who's so cool. She's so cool. And but speaking to her about music, I felt like a toddler. I was like, I want loud and clangy, I'm like, I don't know, but she was so cool because it really came down to emotion, and I really want this scene. I want to feel how alone she feels, or I want to feel how desperate she feels, or whether that was through imagery or through music or whatever, and that we used all these different references, but at the end of the day it was emotion for the most part.
I think timing-wise, as early as you can, because the closer you get to actually producing the thing, the harder it gets to do anything. Schedule-wise, even just mental space, the last few weeks just become this blur where everyone's just kind of going, and you really don't have that time to sit back and have these philosophical discussions. So I would just say, as early as you possibly can, watch those movies together, have those discussions, do the field trips, because then at that point, when you enter this sort of autopilot, just get it done stage, then everyone already has that foundation, and everyone's already just working on autopilot, but in the same direction. So I think it's never early enough to have those like really deep discussions.
Yeah, I like doing very early, but then also last minute when you're shooting in a kind of crazy, surprising way, because I think that can be like a fun, weird challenge, you know? So like I'll do early on, definitely, you know, I'll communicate the vision. Sometimes not for this film, Look Into My Eyes. Unfortunately, this film defied the idea of a treatment, so I could not do it in that way. But with my other films, often I'll write a treatment or like a short story form of what, if I had to turn in the movie tomorrow, not knowing a lot, what I imagine the movie would be today. And I'll give that to my collaborators, or I'll hide it away until we get stuck in the edit, and then we'll pull it out and be like, what was the original idea again? But so that, with treatments, with this film, Look Into My Eyes, I was obsessed with the movie Afterlife, this Japanese film from the 90s as a reference point for it, both in a very specific thing about its visual style and about when it's using handheld camera versus tripod. I really analyzed that, but also in its narrative structure, because it has a main character that you don't even see a shot of until 20 minutes in. So I wrote this I made a 30-page PDF with over 100 stills from Afterlife, like analyzing and breaking this down. And my producer was like, this is like a master's thesis. Like, what is this for? And I was like, well, it's a jumping off point for, it's just like learnings from Afterlife, you know? And it might not directly apply in every case, but it did teach me a lot to kind of analyze the movie in that way. But so that was all stuff I do way in advance, but I find it very fun with documentary to do. And I think it's, again, because I didn't go to film school, and so I struggle to have another language of this other than the kind of palette of movies that I've seen and love. So like, I like the last minuteness of, for example, one time I was shooting a guy having surgery, and there was this crazy machine in the operating room. It looked very futuristic. And I'm like, we're gonna pull stills from Solaris, and we're gonna try to get these exact shots. And everyone's like, this makes no sense. The movie's nothing like Solaris. And I'm like, but this one composition of the circle machine is like Solaris. Like, let's get it. And then it gives you this kind of thrilling mission to be on, you know, and it kind of, for me, it helps me cope with the parts of documentary making that are out of my control, you know what I mean? Being like, we're gonna get this shot, or like the last shot of this film I made about a Japanese Zen priest. He simulates his own death, and I truly lit it like a scene from Written on the Wind, the Douglas Sirk melodrama. And again, everyone's like, this makes no sense. But when you look at them side by side, they do have something in common. And there isn't even like a deep meaning on it, but for me, it gave me and the team, I think, something to be excited about, and like this impossible goal to go towards, which I think is fun.
We don't have time for a lot, so I'm trying to cut everyone. We'll go here in the glasses. Yes, you at the front. There's a microphone coming to you. Yeah, right here. Raise your hand. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Kiara, and I'm a director, and I go to UNLV. And I wanted to ask Laura a question because this is your first film, and I just wanted to ask, when it comes to working with your actors, because I'm a lot of focus based on my actors and like having conversations with them and pushing them to the level. How was it working with such big actors, and also like how did you hype yourself up to like talk to them and like kind of go to them and like tell them like, hey, I need you to do it this sort of way, or like what verbs can I do to like push you to like catch this moment, if that makes sense?
It's such a good question because it was terrifying before I worked with them. You know, like before, it was all the anticipation. You know, it was all like, oh my God, what is it going to be like to work with these? I mean, they're some of the greatest actors of our generation. I was like very intimidated. But you know, they're like, I mean, here's the thing. We really just got super, super lucky. They're like genuinely very good people, like very good people. And they were so kind and they were so patient. And they really were just into like honoring this story and telling this story. I feel like with Laura, I was like, you know, this character's like, you know, it's the idea is that it's this teenage girl's mother, but it wasn't my mother. And I was very clear with her, like, I don't want to like emulate my mother, you know, like I want you to create a character that feels like what you're interpreting from the script, you know. And so I mean, it was just very like collaborative and coming at people just from a real like human place. We had many dinners, we got to know each other, and you stop seeing them as like a celebrity, you know, and more just like your colleagues that you're making a movie with. And thankfully, you know, I don't know what I would have done if they were nuts, you know, I mean, I don't know, I truly don't know, you know, I hear stories about, and I'm like, I don't know what you do. People somehow make it work, I don't know. They happen to just be like really kind, wonderful people. And so I just kind of directed them like anybody, you know, just talking about things and you know, and I also learned from Laura, you know, like I'd have an idea about something and she'd be like, well, she just was here and then she's going here, you know, and I'm like, oh, right. You know, like Laura prepares like a filmmaker. Like she has a big board in her dressing room that has all her costumes and why she's wearing them and where she's coming from and where she's going and why she would be in this mood and say these lines. And she also, oh my God, if you try to change anything in the script, like if I'm like, oh, Laura, you don't have to do that. She's like, oh no, we'll get it. It's in the script, you know? And as a writer, you're like, who are you? You know, like no one is that way, you know? But she reads the script and she prepares and she's like, this is the story and we're gonna tell this story. And Woody is just like, you know, he's, you know, making the extras laugh and making the extras applaud. Like he's just like hilarious and fun. And yeah, I mean, it really was just a lot of conversations and suggestions and, you know, knowing that like these people have a process and, you know, I'm not going to disrupt their process or change their process, and trusting them and them trusting me. And yeah, it was a big blessing.
We have time for one more question. Sure, right here in the front. Yeah.
Thank you. Just to riff off a previous question, maybe different than advice, but like no film ever goes to plan. It's kind of, there's crashes happening all the time. You have to find solutions. But if you could maybe like anecdotally tell us a challenge that you went through on your early films that you had to get through, I feel like that could probably give some nice advice.
There's so many. That's why I'm just like hundreds. I'm just trying to think of one.
I think for me, it's not one particular one, but the balance between trusting your gut and sometimes knowing that you're not always right is really difficult. Because, you know, here I just, you know, spent the last hour talking about how important it is to have that instinct and trust it and go with it and just like do the thing that you feel is right. But I think it's very grounding, I think, as a filmmaker to just say like, here's this thing that I believe is right, and everything that I've learned in my life leads me to believe that this is the right decision. And then someone proves you wrong. And then you're like, what? Okay, what does that do to, like, I have to make another decision right away, and should I still try to go through this process, or should I just let go? And I think that, to me, to this day, is still the hardest thing, because as a filmmaker, you have to trust your gut, and that's sort of the only thing you have. But there come times, often, many, many times, when you're editing, when you're like, I love this moment, and I cannot live without this moment. It's the most important thing about the movie. And then you play it for people, and they're like, you know, it doesn't work. And you're just like, oh, shit, well, I guess I just need to be open to being wrong, and I just need to know that sometimes I'll need to trust my gut, and sometimes I need to trust someone else's gut. And that is really difficult. That is really difficult. I don't know if there's anyone that could tell you how to navigate that other than yourself. And it takes sort of like a lot of determination, but also a lot of humility and knowing when to switch between one and the other. Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, I am so with you on that. You're getting at something that is essential here because, you know, yeah, this is a mass medium, an art form designed for audiences. And yeah, I too do like rough cut screenings along the way, and you realize your blind spots, like, oh, they didn't even know this person was a doctor. The audience, you know, that's the kind of thing you're like, thank God I showed it to people. They could tell me these blind spots, and it's so helpful. On the other hand, if you're a little bit lost in the dark yourself, that process can also be not good, because you might get to a point, if you're like, sometimes I've been in a situation where it's like decision A or decision B, the rough cut audience is exactly split between A and B. You know, that can be very overwhelming and intense to figure it out and to get out of the headspace of tallying votes or just doing whatever the majority of the audience wants. Because one thing I've learned too is that you might not be making a film that will please the mass audience. Like a couple of my films I'm the most proud of had a very divisive reaction at rough cut screenings. And I had to get to a place of accepting not everyone's going to love this. I'm feeling what this half of the room is saying more. And so I'm going to go for it in that direction and just accept that you might not get some kind of, fantasy universal validation, which you won't get anyway. So that's been a thing that I still constantly struggle with and learn from every film. Totally different challenge, but such a great thing to point out.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't ever go the way it's supposed to. Like, just never. Every day is like, oh, shit. So it's, it's like, it almost like is challenging. Like, that's what it is. Like, that's what the job is just like constant challenges. I feel like what we were running into a lot in Charleston was like, extras not showing up, and it's a very extras heavy movie, and so they just wouldn't come. So we and there's nothing you can do, they're just not there, and you need human bodies, and there's no human bodies, and you're just like and then then somebody will be like, what, well, I know there's supposed to be 70 people, but we're gonna take these 10 people and change their hats around, and like they're gonna have hats this color over here, and then we're gonna shoot them over here in different hats, and I mean, we truly like color corrected redheads to look like brunettes, so they didn't look like the same redhead that you're seeing over and over again. Like, we just got, it was insane. It was like a constant challenge, and to the point where one of our producers went to downtown Charleston with like flyers and was like, please come be an extra, we will pay you, and it it worked out. Somehow it just works out, but. If I had gotten really upset on the no extras days, like it wouldn't, you just have to be like, oh, okay, we need 75 and we have 4 people and a child. Okay, how many hats do we have, you just have to keep going and roll with it and trust that someone's gonna have the hats idea and someone's gonna have we'll color correct the redheads idea and it will get done and it will be okay. And know that every single day it's gonna go wrong. But I think ultimately all those moments that feel like they're so wrong, they end up being a gift in a weird way, or it ends up being better than you ever could have imagined, even though in the moment you're like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me.
That's an amazing note to end on, actually. Thank you so much, Laura, Carlos, Lana. It's really a joy to have you all here. Thank you.
Thank you.